There is a very particular kind of suffering that comes with living in a mind that refuses to sit still. People who live with attention-related difficulties are not simply distracted. They do not lack effort, and they do not lack intelligence. Most of them have been trying harder than anyone around them realizes, often since childhood. They exert willpower just to maintain the baseline that others take for granted. And behind the fatigue, behind the frustration, there is often a quiet fear, the fear that life will pass without fully inhabiting one's potential, not because there is no desire, but because attention keeps slipping away before action can build momentum. In psychological terms, ADHD is not merely a matter of poor attention, it is a matter of poor regulation of attention, a difficulty in directing psychic energy at will. In other words, the mind is not empty. It is overflowing. It does not lack horsepower. It lacks a steering mechanism robust enough to manage the engine beneath it. And when this engine is both powerful and sensitive, you do not get calm productivity. You get bursts of brilliance punctuated by periods of confusion, boredom, and emotional overwhelm. Traditionally, people speak about ADHD through a medical or behavioral lens. That has value. Medication and structured behavioral tools often help tremendously, but psychological reality is broader than symptom lists and treatment plans. Many individuals with ADHD do not only struggle with tasks and deadlines, they struggle with identity, meaning, self-trust, and relationship to obligation. They carry shame for not meeting standards they deeply wanted to meet. They wrestle with internal accusations. Why can't I just do it like everyone else? And that private self-violence erodes confidence and hope. A depth psychological perspective does not romanticize difficulty. It does not claim that ADHD is a gift by default. It recognizes that challenge can become capacity, but only if the psyche is met honestly. And honesty begins with this. People with ADHD are not empty, lazy, unmotivated, or unreliable by nature. They are often overfilled, pulled by inner movements that have never been understood or integrated. The very thing that creates struggle also contains the seeds of creativity, intensity, and originality. But without structure, those qualities scatter instead of consolidating into a grounded adult life. The modern world asks the mind to operate like a machine, steady output, linear work cycles, predictable performance. But some psyches are organized differently. They operate more like perception radars than conveyor belts. They scan constantly. They respond to novelty. They detect meaning through emotional and imaginative resonance rather than routine. That kind of mind can be deeply capable, but it does not thrive in environments designed for uniform productivity. And when a person builds their identity around an environment they were never built for, they eventually feel the strain as fatigue, shame, procrastination, self-criticism, or quiet despair. From a depth-oriented psychological viewpoint, one of the roots of ADHD distress comes from a chronic mismatch between inner nature and outer demands. For many individuals, attention does not fail randomly. It collapses specifically around things that feel meaningless, lifeless, or imposed without psychological buy-in. When something feels purposeful, stimulating, or emotionally charged, attention arrives immediately and fully. This is not inconsistency of character. It is consistency of nervous system truth. A system built to pursue meaningful engagement simply malfunctions when trapped in sustained meaninglessness. Growing up, many people with ADHD learn to fake normalcy. They suppress spontaneity to fit classroom expectations. They tense their bodies to stay still. They internalize criticism until they become their own harshest supervisor. They push themselves through exhaustion, then crash, then start over with renewed vows to be disciplined this time. This creates a sense of living a double life, the external role and the inner reality. And as the years pass, the internal self becomes tired of pretending. The psyche eventually resists further distortion, and this resistance shows up as procrastination, irritability, emotional volatility, or sudden cravings for stimulation, change, or escape. When we talk about healing in a Jung-informed framework, we do not mean curing a diagnosis. We mean reconciling the inner world with the outer one. We mean facing the full truth of who someone is, not the adapted self, not the social role, not the exhausted mask, but the living psychological structure behind all that effort. And for someone with ADHD, everything changes when they stop asking, how do I force myself to behave like everyone else? And begin asking, how do I structure my life around the way my psyche actually functions? This shift is not indulgence. It is maturity. It is integration. Structure does not disappear. It becomes custom-built instead of borrowed. Self-discipline does not vanish. It becomes aligned with human nature instead of imposed against it. When people begin working with their natural rhythm, they stop burning all their willpower on resisting themselves. That freed energy can finally move toward creation, mastery, contribution, and depth. One of the central observations in Jung's clinical work was that the human psyche always tries to grow toward wholeness, even when it looks like chaos from the outside. Symptoms, distractions, impulses, and moods are not random enemies. They are communications from undiscovered parts of the self. For someone with ADHD, procrastination often hides fear. Fear of not being good enough, of failing publicly, of failing privately, or of confronting the gap between potential and reality. Restlessness often hides hunger for stimulation, for movement, for emotional contact, for meaningful challenge, and emotional outbursts often hide exhaustion, years of self-judgment carried in silence. If we treat ADHD purely as a willpower failure, we shame the person and strangle the psyche. If we treat it purely as a medical problem, we risk overlooking the inner story. But when we treat it as a psychological style with strengths, vulnerabilities, and developmental needs, we begin to build a structure that is not fragile, but alive. If this is resonating with you, if you can feel the truth of it somewhere in your chest, pause for a moment and support the channel. Hit the like button so the algorithm doesn't bury content meant for people like us. And if you recognize parts of your own story here, share it in the comments. Your voice might be the thing another man needs to realize he isn't alone. And of course, subscribe if you want more work like this. Depth, honesty, and the psychology of becoming whole. Thank you. One of the most damaging beliefs people with ADHD carry is the idea that their inconsistency is a moral failing. They believe they are irresponsible or undisciplined, when in reality, discipline built on self-attack is unsustainable. Consistency does not grow from self-punishment. It grows from self-understanding, emotional regulation, and clear structure. For example, a person with ADHD often benefits from short-timed work blocks, physical movement between tasks, visible task lists rather than mental ones, and immediate feedback loops. These are not crutches. They are designed scaffolds for a unique nervous system. Another important point is this. The ADHD mind is often imaginative, future-oriented, and capable of deep intuitive processing. But this strength becomes a liability when fear, indecision, or perfectionism hijack the imagination. The person begins rehearsing outcomes instead of living them. They get stuck in internal planning loops or fear-based avoidance. Healing does not require shutting down imagination. It requires grounding it, harnessing it, and pairing it with concrete steps. Imagination turns into life when it has structure. Structure turns into imprisonment when it has no imagination. The goal is synergy. In depth psychology, we often encounter the phenomenon where someone's symptom is actually a misdirected talent. The restless mind is a scanning mind. The easily bored mind is a mind built for innovation. The emotionally reactive person is often deeply sensitive and perceptive. The individual who starts many projects is often someone with abundant creative drive who has never been taught how to finish without losing soul. When these qualities are disciplined, refined, and integrated, they can create extraordinary capacity. But when they remain unconscious or shamed, they turn inward and cause suffering. There is an additional layer here. Many adults with ADHD have been stuck in a cycle of trying to prove themselves through extreme effort. They swing between periods of intense productivity and collapse. They push themselves to extremes in an attempt to earn rest, then crash from exhaustion and guilt, then begin again with even harsher self-imposed standards. This is not lack of discipline. It is unsustainable discipline fueled by shame rather than alignment. The nervous system cannot regulate itself through self-attack. It regulates through clarity, rhythm, and self-respect. To heal in a depth-oriented way means creating a new relationship with effort. Instead of demanding perfection, we create small, reliable rituals that build trust in the self. Instead of forcing marathon sessions, we honor the natural tempo of the psyche, bursts of intensity followed by intentional rest. Instead of using shame as fuel, we cultivate curiosity. When someone with ADHD asks, "What does my mind need in order to function well right now?" Instead of, "Why am I like this?" they step into agency rather than self-warfare. A person with ADHD often needs external structure to support internal intention. That can be as simple as time blocking, alarms, whiteboards, checklists, physical movement breaks, and accountability partnerships. In depth psychology, we do not idolize self-sufficiency. We recognize that independence is strongest when supported by chosen systems. Asking for structure is not weakness, it is wisdom. Tools are not signs of inadequacy, they are extensions of the self. Emotional regulation is just as important. Many individuals with ADHD experience emotions intensely, and they feel them quickly. This intensity can overwhelm planning and follow-through, but intense emotion is not a flaw, it is a powerful signal system. When understood and integrated, emotional intelligence becomes a driving force for meaningful living. Yet emotional intensity needs containment. Practices such as breath work, somatic grounding, journaling, and therapy help translate raw emotion into clarity and direction. Healing also involves confronting perfectionism. Many people with ADHD secretly strive for perfection to compensate for inconsistency. They over-prepare, overthink, or avoid starting until they can guarantee a flawless outcome. But perfection is a defense against shame. Real progress is messy, The psyche does not grow through ideal performance. It grows through repetition, feedback, and steady practice. A single imperfect act done consistently is more transformative than 1,000 perfect plans never executed. It is also essential to recognize the role of meaning. If a person with ADHD tries to operate without purpose, their system shuts down. But when they align their effort with genuine values, creativity, mastery, contribution, autonomy, depth, their energy unlocks. Meaning is not a luxury for them, it is a requirement. A life without meaningful direction is not neutral, it is draining. And learning to articulate purpose, even in simple daily terms, helps convert psychological energy into action. There is a subtle but profound shift that occurs when someone moves from suppressing their temperament to owning it. Instead of seeing themselves as defective, they recognize that they simply need a specific style of life, much like someone with a strong physical constitution needs a certain diet and exercise pattern. They realize that sustained focus is not impossible. It simply requires alignment and pacing. They discover that boredom is not rebellion, it is information. They stop interpreting fatigue as laziness and start treating it as a signal to rest strategically instead of collapsing. As this integration deepens, a person begins to develop a strong inner adult, one who can negotiate between impulse and obligation, creativity and discipline, desire and responsibility. Not a rigid authority figure, and not a permissive one either. A steady, grounded part of the psyche that understands how to hold structure without violence, how to guide effort without panic, and how to cultivate progress without sacrificing humanity. This is the psychological goal, a life where your nature and your responsibilities are not enemies, a life where you move from self-punishment to self-leadership, a life where attention is not a battlefield but a tool, a life where potential does not haunt you but gradually becomes real through steady, structured, meaningful work. Not sudden transformation, but reliable evolution. Real growth for someone with ADHD does not mean eliminating difficulty. It means learning to use their intensity wisely. It means building systems that respect who they are. It means learning patience, not as a restriction, but as a strength. It means showing up for the small tasks without abandoning the big vision. It means accepting that identity is not fixed by failure, and that success is built through consistency, not sudden genius. And perhaps most importantly, it means recognizing that your mind is not your enemy. It is a powerful instrument that requires skilled handling. It demands respect, not resentment. It needs both boundaries and freedom. It needs clear goals and flexible methods. It needs rest and challenge. It needs meaning and routine. When all of this comes together, attention becomes less like a wild creature and more like a trained companion, still spirited, still alive, but capable of direction and depth. This process is not fast. It is not glamorous, but it is profoundly dignifying. When a person learns to work with their nature, they stop living on the defensive. They stop apologizing for existing. They begin to trust themselves. They begin to build a life that holds them instead of a life they must constantly survive. And gradually, the scattered energy begins to settle. Focus emerges more naturally. Follow-through becomes easier. The nervous system relaxes. Confidence grows, creativity strengthens, and the sense of living a divided life begins to dissolve. ADHD, in this view, is not a singular problem to be eliminated. It is a style of mind that requires integration, structure, and self-respect. It asks for individualized systems rather than inherited ones. It asks for honest self-observation and the courage to build differently. It asks for emotional maturity, not perfection. And when met properly, it often becomes a source of depth, creativity, and insight, rather than a source of shame. To anyone living this experience, you are not behind, you are not broken, you are not failed potential. Your mind is capable of remarkable things when it is understood and supported. With structure, rhythm, emotional clarity and self-leadership, attention becomes possible, momentum becomes possible, stability becomes possible, and life becomes not a constant apology, but a grounded expression of who you actually are. Not in one grand transformation, but in steady, reliable steps, built on awareness, built on structure, built on kindness, built on truth, and eventually built into a life you can stand inside confidently, without pretending, without collapsing, and without abandoning yourself. If this content spoke to you, support the channel, like the video, and subscribe. It helps this work reach others who are ready for it. We're building something here, slow, steady, but real. Thank you for being part of it.